And President-elect Trump's appointments are shedding some light on what his promised mass deportations could look like. Trump's nominee for Homeland Security, Secretary Kristi Noem, says criminals are going to be first on the list to go.
It is going to be a big operation, and President Trump has already indicated that he wants to start by making sure that we're deporting the most dangerous first.
I want to bring in Reichlin-Melnick from the American Immigration Council for more. Erin, thanks for coming on. You know, Trump's so-called border czar Tom Homan echoed Noem's comments there about prioritizing deportation of criminals and gang members. So how do you go about doing that?
Well, the most important thing to understand is that ICE already prioritizes people with criminal records and gang members. And those have been the key priority of all administrations over the last 20 years. So any efforts to expand to mass deportations would run into the fact that there simply are not that many criminals that ICE is not already going after.
So why do you hear these stories? Are they the exceptions of people with a criminal history coming into this country, or people who develop a criminal history while they're in this country still staying here?
Yeah, what we know is statistically that undocumented immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than native-born citizens. But there are 13 to 15 million undocumented immigrants in the country, and even if a small fraction of them do commit some sort of crimes, then that will be some people that end up with criminal records. But those are the people that ICE is already prioritizing. So any efforts to carry out so-called mass deportations would require ICE to expand the net to people with no records. And we know from the first Trump administrations, arrests of people with zero criminal records at all actually went up significantly.
Now, the founder of the country's largest private prison company told investors last week that Trump's deportation plans represent, quote, a potential sea of change for the industry. You've said there's no way to accomplish mass deportations without mass detention. Why is that? And do you still think, based on what Noem is saying now, that they will need to create this potential sea of change in the private prison industry?
Without a doubt, the Trump administration is going to be a windfall for the private prison industry, and they will rake in billions of dollars of taxpayer money to detain immigrants. Right now, the ICE has capacity to detain about 41,500 people. That's what Congress authorized. That is a relatively small number compared to the amount of people who are in the country who face potential removal. So any administration is going to struggle to carry out large-scale deportations without creating new detention camps, and the private prison companies are going to be benefiting from that the most.
So who would be detained in that scenario, and for how long, and how is it different from the way things have worked during previous administrations?
Well, we strongly suspect that the administration is going to restart the practice of so-called family detention, where parents and children are held together in ICE detention centers. This is a practice that was first resumed under President Obama, expanded under President Trump, and then terminated under President Biden. And the incoming administration has promised to bring these detention centers back. But crucially, we don't know exactly who they're going to go after now because they have been so inconsistent on who the targets will be. On the one hand, you have Stephen Miller, who says we will send the military into the U.S. to round up illegal aliens, and he has not qualified and said just people with criminal records. And on the other hand, you have Tom Homan, who has said that ICE will not be carrying out raids and that there will just simply be more targeted arrests. Both of those men are going to hold significant positions of power within this new deportation apparatus, and we are watching closely to see whose vision of enforcement is going to win the day.
Now, President-elect Trump says there's no price tag on his mass deportation plan. You estimate the cost of a one-time mass deportation operation to be at least $315 billion. What does that take into account, and how does that figure change if the administration takes a more gradual approach and begins by focusing on criminals, as they say?
Yeah, well, you know, if they begin by focusing on criminals, then quite frankly, since ICE is already doing that, it wouldn't require any kind of massive increase in funding. But that's not what they've promised elsewhere. And we know, for example, that the average cost of a single arrest of a fugitive in the community, a so-called at-large arrest, is over $6,600 per person and can take hundreds of man hours. So if they want to ramp up enforcement, they're going to have to hire thousands of new agents. They're going to have to build thousands of new detention beds and hire hundreds of new immigration judges. And all of that is going to come at a cost of billions of dollars, which is why control of Congress and the federal appropriations process is going to have such a big impact. If Congress gives the Trump administration a blank check, they will be able to start the mass hiring programs they're going to need to carry out so-called mass deportations. If they keep funding broadly in line with what it is today, it's hard to see how the Trump administration would be able to carry out mass deportation operations with insufficient funding.
All right, we'll be watching closely, and I know you will too. American Immigration Council Senior Fellow Aaron Reichlin-Melnick. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.